There it is. We're on.
This meeting of the Rolling Meadows City Council is hereby called to order. This is a committee of the whole meeting, and there's no pledge of allegiance during this meeting, and there is one absent alderman this evening. It's Mr. Judd. And with that, we'll move forward into the one of the 5 agenda items. And my understanding is of the 5 agenda items we have this evening, pretty much all of them need some kind of a straw vote from the alderman, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll start off with the billboard for Arlington International Race Course property, and that would be with you, Mr. Crumstock, for the presentation and the introduction.
That's correct. Obviously, thank you very much, City Council. The first item that we do have is a request really more of gauging the City Council. This is on Arlington Heights property, Arlington International Racecourse property in the city of Rolling Meadows. As many people around know that we have on the other side an overlay and distance. This side we don't actually have any of those requirements, but we are bringing it back because it does have to go to the Plan Commission, and we do need to make sure that you're comfortable with what's being said. Obviously, from the general manager of Arlington International Racecourse, Tony Petrillo is actually here, and he's actually going to get up to have part of his conversation. But again, they do need to go to the Plan Commission. Then after that, they would be before the City Council for approval. We're hoping that they would be making the April Plan Commission. Then the last meeting for first reading would be the April meeting, and then obviously a May meeting. But they're hoping to get this double-sided digital billboard up and running pretty quickly. Obviously in that May, if we get the good gauge and they continue working on it. They are looking at 20 by 60. This is another commitment. Working at it's a little bit farther from 53 than other billboards, but again, all that tonight is for the race course to do their presentation, talk about what the sign is, what it would actually be used for the City Council to understand what's being presented before it does go, so they can hear if it's going to be a positive outlook or a negative outlook. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Petrillo.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Petrella.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Alderman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this evening. And thank you to Barry. He's been very helpful in helping us assemble some information that we presented to him the other day in order to give you the concept of what we would like to be able to do insofar as installing a double-sided digital billboard. Am I not? How's that better? Sorry about that. Tonight with me also is our Director of Operations, Kevin Clark. He has been the primary point of contact for us on this project. Barry stated that there were 2 questions that we would like to address this evening: is what the sign is and what it would be used for. The sign is a dual-sided 20 by 60 digital billboard. We hope to have it located on a very small sliver parcel of property that we own that sits in Rolling Meadows, and would sit it back from the highway, but would sit it up at a height that would be visible from 53, anywhere from 95 to 105 feet, depending on the sight lines, that would allow us to get visibility and maximum exposure from those traveling northbound and southbound on Route 53. We would have 6 slates per minute, 10 seconds each slate. So we would use one for Arlington International Racecourse to promote our events on the racecourse year-round. During the race season, it might be used a little bit more heavily. In the off-season, when we have expos or other types of events, craft fairs, holiday fairs, we might use one slate or not a slate at all. We would sell the rest of the inventory that would produce revenue for us to pay the cost of installing the sign, which is approximately $700,000. We'd hope to get that back in 3.5 to 4 years before we start turning revenue, which we anticipate being around $120,000 a year. Those slates, we anticipate that they would sell between $2,000 and $2,500 a week. We'd drive a total revenue of about $300,000, and then after expenses, we'd net about $120,000. We are always looking for additional sources of revenue. Over the last 7 years, our revenues from wagering have decreased 38%, and we've established ourselves as an entertainment destination, or reinventing ourselves as an entertainment destination since that time. In 2009, about 70% of our revenues were driven from wagering on horse races, on our races. Today, that's reversed. We drive about 70% of our revenues from other forms of entertainment. That might be events during racing, wine festivals, music festivals, some types of shows, music and motors, different types of themed events that we run during the 22-week period that we operate the race course for horse racing. The other portion of our revenues are driven by ride and drives that we rent our parking lots for, and then holiday craft shows, trade shows, etc. during the off season inside our building. So that is our primary purpose in doing that, to drive some revenues back into the track, drive more foot traffic back into the track as well. So those are our primary purpose in doing this. I do want to be upfront and honest. We are pursuing a location inside Arlington Heights. They do not allow billboards currently, so we would have to appear before them. We are on a tight deadline if we use an Arlington Heights location. If you're familiar, as you drive past the race course, you see a kind of an egg-shaped track that's used for training. If we don't have the billboard up prior to those horses arriving, we can't do construction. That site becomes an unusable site for us, and then we would have to wait. But we are pretty much overdue on getting this project launched, so we're looking to get a location. The Rolling Meadows location offers a very similar sight line. The value drops a little bit on the board, but we had allowed for some vacancy rates on that board. Meaning we would not be able to sell it as a primary location at $3,500 a slate. It drops to about $2,500 a slate. The Rolling Meadows location doesn't pose that inconvenience to us. There are no horses that we have to worry about in constructing the billboard, and we're under a lot of pressure, I should say. Not a lot of pressure, but we've allocated the money in 2016, and our corporation is looking to make use of that money. So getting a billboard up as quickly as possible is one of our goals. So that's why we thought Rolling Meadows would be a good location to go into and offer us still the opportunity without any encumbrances or time constraints that may be faced with the Arlington Heights location.
Very, very good. Then let's start off with any clarification questions for Mr. Petrollo on this? Yes, Ms. Sanjakis.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you're going in front of Arlington Heights first to see about doing it there, and then if that doesn't work, you're looking at the Rolling Meadows? Am I getting that wrong?
No, we wouldn't. We appear before Arlington Heights. We're scheduled to appear before Arlington Heights on March 6th.
Okay.
Whether or not that goes through, we have no idea. We know, though, that if they would, the City Council would vote, there's still a very long permit process to go through because they have no ordinances, regulations, permitting process for this type of endeavor.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other clarification questions before we go into a discussion? And there are no sign-in people to ask any questions. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Prina?
Thank you. I'm sorry, came in a few minutes late, so I just want to make sure. Is there what's your timeline, basically? I mean, I may have missed it when I came in or through, but your timeline that you're coming to us here, when would you want this completed?
I believe that this would go before the Planning Commission in April, and then come back to this body in May if it were to pass through, or if you were to allow us to proceed this evening. As soon as we get some idea that this might be something you would be amenable to, we'd start working on the permit process right away. And then we have all the construction documents ready for submittal. We just have to have a site survey that's done, but as soon as we would get the approval to move ahead and do construction, we would start to follow within a couple weeks of starting that construction, so hopefully by end of May.
And then what is the benefit to Meadows?
I don't know if Rolling Meadows has a established permit fee for each of these locations, or if there's a tax placed on the sales of these, but we'd be willing to share a portion of our slate with Rolling Meadows. For example, I would say, let's say we would use 2 slates and then provide one for Rolling Meadows to use a slate within a 3-minute period, and then the 4th minute use an Arlington International Racecourse slate. So we will occupy 1 slate in the 60-second rotation of six slates. So we would be able from time to time share that slate with the City of Rolling Meadows.
Great question, Mr. Crumstock.
There's actually 2 parts for that. Obviously, there's the construction permit for the electronic sign, and then obviously there's the annual inspection sign that we would be doing with that. So nominal on our side, but again, as you just heard, there is some benefit for us to doing some advertising of events.
My only question is, as we go forward, maybe you could give us what we refer to as a staff report on what you estimate potential revenue could be for the city.
Okay. Good. Any other discussion on this? Mr. Diastis?
Mr. Crumstock, does this fall within our permitted sign areas along 53? I know we had...
It's actually outside of the overlay and our distance factors. So again, this section where we're talking about has just fallen out of those areas.
Okay.
And city attorney was looking like if you wanted to say something else, but that's one reason why they're entitled to this, because it just fell out. The other side of west of 53, that's where we have the overlay and the sign, the dimensions, how far, the 700 feet. This we just missed with what we were trying to do, because reality, sometimes we forget that's even Rolling Meadows with road.
This is a road?
It's the road, when you come up to Rowling, you take a right-hand turn into the racetrack. Mm-hmm. That's their property. So the Mayflower and the AT&T building that's back there, that's Rolling Meadows. So that little corner, but that little road that they're talking about placing this, and the schematic that you look at, that aerial that's in the design, that road is still part of Rolling Meadows.
Is that the light?
Yes, you take the right-hand turn, and
Left
again,
is
it's
industrial or Illinois.
yeah, it's about 100 feet until you hit their gate.
Okay, that's what
so
I thought.
again, that road is really theirs.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Any other discussion? Mr. Cannon?
We can talk about anything here now? About relative
Yes.
to this? Okay.
Relative to this.
I'm going to throw a little curveball at you that you're probably not expecting, but an irritant that I've had with some of the property over there is on the east side of your property, there's a sidewalk that years ago Rolling Meadows actually installed, even though it's in Arlington Heights. This is on the eastern border of your property.
Yes.
For all these years, we've been plowing that, and Arlington Heights will not take that over. So I guess as a subset to this, if we approve this, I would like you to consider taking over plowing that sidewalk yourself.
Is that on Wilkie Road that you
Yes.
speak of, that runs from our entrance near Northwest Highway
It's about
down?
an 8 or 10 foot wide sidewalk, a cement sidewalk.
Yes.
We actually paid for that sidewalk, and we've been
Okay.
paying for the maintenance more or less. So I guess as a trade-off, as part of this deal, I would like to see you guys consider taking over that plowing.
Oh, sure, that wouldn't be an issue. We do the train lot, so we have all the equipment to be able to do that.
Other than that, I don't see, unless something comes up that we haven't talked about tonight, I would support this.
Okay. All good discussion. Any other questions or, for my 2 cents, thank you for being here. Thank you for considering us. And we'd like to be always number one, of course. But we're fine with where we are, and we would certainly like to build a relationship with you with this sign now to do other things. So as you get more involved in Rolling Meadows, and I had the discussion with you earlier, that this would be something we'd certainly like to have you work with us on, and I'm pretty much for it. Any other discussion on this? Then if it's okay, why don't we just take kind of a straw vote on who's in favor of this? Maybe just raise your hand. Okay. So it looks like pretty much a majority unanimous at this point in time. So that's good news. That's good news. So please take the comments that we've given you and under advisement, and as you work your way through the zoning group and the permits and all that stuff, we'll do whatever we can from our perspective on the council to make sure it happens. Fair enough?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time. We appreciate it. And so I don't want to be rude. I'm happy to stay, but I've got to catch a flight in the morning. I'm not packed at all.
No, we're fine. You're first on the agenda. You get to leave first.
All right. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. The second agenda item is this planning ZBA discussion, and I'll refer once again to Mr. Crumstock, and this is item number 2, and we actually do have a sign-in sheet person who wants to speak on this too. So, but I'll start the conversation with you, Mr. Crumstock. You can kind of fill in the...
Obviously, I'll do the intro. Obviously, the City Council has seen this before. It's been about a year and a little bit since we had this discussion in the past, but you can see the new information that we're bringing between the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board. As Mayor Veenbaas knows, there are certain times that people who have been on the Zoning Board ask, can I please be on another board because we haven't met. Just for information purposes, the Zoning Board met once in 2016, and that was May of 2016, on one issue about fencing. If you look at the survey that was actually conducted, you can see where other places have combined the commissions, where they actually are. And before I turn it over to Ms. Stainer, the reminder is April, we do have some of the reappointments coming up, so it might be time to do it. And also, staff feels comfortable if the council says, okay, we'd like to make the new plan zoning board as a larger board, and then as attrition happens, bring it back down. We understand that, but we still think for efficiencies, for some of the other variables that staff deals with, it really is a good proposal before you to actually combine the two and actually make some of the people who feel that they're a little underutilized part of the utilization of a committee and commission. With that, I turn that over to Ms. Stainer.
Thank you. Mr. Crumstock has pretty well summarized exactly why we're here discussing this.
We're happy to have you explain it even more.
Well, we have 2 commissions. One is the Plan Commission and one is the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals actually deals with variations such as location of porches, sunrooms, garages, sheds, that kind of thing. For the most part, as you know, Rolling Meadows is built out, and these variations are relatively few and far between, and as Mr. Crumstock mentioned, we had one last year. The Plan Commission, on the other hand, does more of the major developments, plan unit developments, subdivisions, things like that, and they meet fairly regularly. So I've worked with in the past planning and zoning. It is very efficient. All zoning matters would go to the planning and zoning. And as Mr. Crumstock indicated, there are some appointments that are coming due on the ZBA. If we wanted to combine them, we could make a pretty full commission that deals only with zoning issues.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll start off with any clarifications from any of the council? Mr. Cannon.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So, Barry, what you're saying is if we approve this, we would increase the number back to 9? and then eventually get it back to 7? Is that, I'm just asking what the
The
clarification.
plan, yeah, the plan would be, obviously, we would look at who's available, who is actually going back for reappointment. So yes, we might go up to 9. If we see some tweaking that we need to do, like go up to 11 for a period of time. But then during attrition and over the years, we would bring it back to the 7 that we actually had the discussion. So we understand it's going to be a little growth at this point in time, but we want everybody to feel comfortable with the overall combination.
Great, thank you.
Good. And any other clarification questions before we move into the discussion? Mr. Prano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't know if it's Jim or Barry, does the council have to rewrite an ordinance for this to happen? What would the,
Yes.
what would the procedure be as we're talking about this?
Yeah, we'd have to rewrite the ordinance.
No, it's not any big issue to do that,
No,
because you're talking about fluctuating with people, that's all I
right.
wanted to ask.
Well,
Okay.
that would just create another ordinance.
As long as our council and our manager are okay with that, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Any other clarifications and how about going into discussion? Any discussion on this issue? And then the council, and then we do have a sign-in. Mr. Jerry Hill wants to talk about item number 2. Thank you, Valerie. Would you please come to the microphone, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you may or may not know, I was a past chairman of the ZBA many years ago, and as Barry and Valerie have both pointed out, there's quite a difference between the two commissions, the most prominent difference being who decides the case. And while it is true that Rolling Meadows is pretty much built out, in my estimation, there might be need for as many variance requests as people remodel, move on, add porches, add patios, add whatever, especially when they're talking about moving into easements and the like. All that I would like the discussion to entail is that the rights of the petitioners and the neighbors, who are a big, big part of whether the ZBA approves a variance, they still have their day in court, so to speak, if it's merged with the Planning Commission. And the second, I was looking very closely at the discussion note, and I could not tell if the decision-making ability now would also be merged. In other words, the Planning Commission now goes to the council. The ZBA decides on its own. So which is that going to be? And if it is going to rest squarely on the council, I think you want to take note of your portions of your meetings that are open to the public, that where there may be some folks who really don't like what's coming out of the merged Planning Commission. And that's all I asked for you to discuss tonight. Thank you.
Fair enough. Any further discussion on that point? Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Crumstock?
I guess the only thing that I would remind anybody with the Plan Commission or the zoning board, there's obviously, with any petition, there's 30-day notice to the neighbors and the residents, and that if the concern is what would happen with some of the authority when we write the ordinance again, Mr. Hill is absolutely correct. Plan Commission items, our recommendation to the City Council and Zoning Board is the authority over that. But we could also, right when we do the ordinance, talk about how that breakup would actually be, and again, going back to the City Council on their items. But notifications are done no matter which committee it is, and we do stay with that 30-day notice no matter what, which is kind of funny because, just to deviate a little bit, the Arlington Heights billboard that we just mentioned, the city was noticed on that one, which I thought was pretty funny, but it came kind of late, but I won't bring that up to Arlington.
Okay. That's fine. Any other discussion on this? Mr. Badger?
Yeah, my only comment would be, thanks to Mr. Hill for bringing that up. If we're going to be discussing the fences that encroach or sheds that are over the easements, I would vote to preserve the way it's done now within that committee, just because I'll have flashbacks to the days when we used to have to approve signs going up for, baseball recruiting. I just think we have better things to do than those sort of issues, and they're better off within those committees. So if we're going to rewrite this ordinance and combine these two groups, let's rewrite it so that the new single group has the final say on the issues that the Zoning Board of Appeals had beforehand.
Okay, so if I understand you correctly, Mr. Manager, you're trying to just clarify here what you'd like to see added to this discussion, so that when it comes back to us, assuming that we give a yay to it, that we consider the things that Mr. Hill and what you're saying as well.
Exactly. So,
Right.
exactly what I just said.
Yep.
If this moves out of committee, when the ordinance is rewritten, things that would be going to this new group, the single group that
Yep.
we're going to be combining, that would have gone to the ZBA before,
Correct.
end at the new group and don't advance into council.
Got it. Can that be, can I ask that question? Can that be done, Mr.
City
Mackel?
Attorney says yes.
Yeah, we could certainly do that.
Okay. Then let's do that then. Okay? Assuming that we get the yeas to do it, I suppose. Any other discussion on it? No other discussion? Can we take a straw vote then?
Yes,
Mr. Comstock?
Yes, and I guess that it's a two-part straw vote. The first one would be if the council feels comfortable making the combination, allowing staff to choose a number, and if it needs to come down over the years, it would come down. But the second part is just what has been brought up about keeping the planning
Okay.
and zoning board.
So, okay, thank you for that clarification. So let's do two straw votes then. One straw vote being, are we good with the combining of both groups? Let's take a show of hands on that. Is that okay? And that's unanimous, so that's a good thing. The second clarification is putting in the verbiage that Mr. Hill included, as well as Mr. Vanger included, and include that, Mr. Mackel, as we write this thing up with you, Barry, Mr. Comstock. So do we show of hands on that? Is that good for everyone? That's a positive too. How about that? Or as I say, how about them apples, right? Okay. Nothing else on this discussion then. Let's move on to number 3. And this is the liquor license, Class B hours. And again, I'll refer to you, Mr. Comstock. You can give us an explanation. And
This is actually one that came up, obviously, the current liquor commissioner and the past liquor commissioner, and their
yes, that would be me.
And a few residents have actually approached the city. There was a letter that was written to the liquor commissioner asking just for Class B. And let me emphasize, there are currently 9 Class B establishments. They range from Jewel Osco, Myers, Walmart, and obviously a few others in there. But a survey was actually conducted by the police department of Rolling Meadows, Arlington Heights, Palatine, Schaumburg, Elk Grove. From that information and from the request, staff does recommend a change of the hours operation, but we also, part of our recommendation is for some consistency on our hours, and that would be Monday through Sunday, obviously, but they would all be starting from 9 a.m. to midnight for each of these Class B establishments.
Very good. So let's start with clarification of the presentation here. Are there any clarification questions concerning this? I see none. So let's move forward to the discussion portion of it. Is there any discussion on this item? Mr. Cannon, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I would support this. I would actually, I had a brief conversation with our police chief. He doesn't think there's any issues from a policing standpoint with this change in hours. And I think it would, I think we were told recently that the liquor licenses are relatively expensive compared to some of our neighbors. So I guess I would like to try to give our guys and girls that own businesses in our town a fighting chance to get the business that's out there. So I guess I would actually even ask for an amendment to even make it a little bit stronger than what the staff was. From looking at our neighbors, like where I live out in my area, I'm only 2 blocks away from Schaumburg. The little bit that I drink, it really won't make a hell of a difference because I buy a 6-pack about every 4 weeks or 4 months, whatever. So it doesn't really affect me, but I think if we want to put our guys and girls again on a competitive advantage, or make sure they're not at a disadvantage, I would suggest we move them to at least an 8 a.m. opening, it looks like. And I would suggest, at least on the weekends, at least a 1 a.m. closing. And it looks like some of our neighbors are even much later than that even. But that would be a recommendation I would make.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
The one,
Mr. Mayor. Yep.
the store that I was involved with was the Armanetti's, their new store, and he's the one who asked, I believe it's for a 1 o'clock license. And I would support that. And we would, Sundays would be from 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. That's the only thing I'd like to see left at 11 instead of 9 a.m. But the rest of it I would support.
And did you say, just to clarify, you said for the Sunday, you wanted to stay 9 a.m. to 12 or 9 to 1?
No, 11. It's presently 11 a.m.
Yep.
to 10 p.m. You can make it 11 a.m. to 12 a.m.
For Sunday?
Sunday.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Diastis?
Thank you. Being in business, and I'm looking at this, we are definitely at a competitive disadvantage here with these hours. I would agree with Mr. Cannon, go with 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. And did you say 7 days a week for that, Mike? I agree with that. I go with 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. 7 days a week.
Okay.
I think anything less than that is hurting our businesses.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion on this item? Mrs. Majikis?
I'd like to see the hours consistent like that also, just for the fact that people will then realize that, okay, oh, it's Sunday, what is this hour? Oh, but Saturday's this hour. So if they all know it's consistently 8 a.m. to midnight or whatever it is, I definitely believe it should be earlier than 11 a.m. on Sundays. But you need consistency of hours so that the customers realize they're not having to wonder what the hours are, so.
So, Ms. Majikis, just to clarify, so you're staying with the 8 to 1?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on it? Okay, so my understanding would be there's actually three things going on here, really. So we'll take 3 straw votes. We'll take 1 to change the hours, which it appears that we are. We'll start with that. Those in favor of changing the hours, what we have, show of hands, aye. Okay, and that's unanimous, I figured. And then we'll break it down into the 2 pieces then. There's one that would be from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. for the hours for all 7 days, correct? Mm-hmm. Number 1, and then the second proposal would be 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. for Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday being 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. Correct, Mr. Reyna? Is that right? So the only day you're concerned about is Sunday?
It would be 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. the rest of the week?
It would be 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. on every day with the exception of Sunday, which would be 11 a.m. to 12 a.m.
Well, more. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, so let's start with the first one then. Let's show of hands for moving the date for all 7 days, this is, for the 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. Show of hands for that, those in favor. Okay, that's pretty much a majority. Well, then the second proposal is the 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. Monday through Saturday, with the exception of Sunday, 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. Show of hands on that. Okay, so not a majority on that one. So right now, the straw vote shows that we would like to make, to go forward with an 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. hours for 7 days a week. Okay? All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, point of
Yes.
clarification.
Yep.
Just, does this involve any changing of license fees? Or do we keep the license?
No,
fees
it's not the
same?
license fee, it's only the hours of
only the hours.
operations.
Right.
Correct.
But sometimes when you change the hours, you change fees in some cities, so.
I don't think there was any proposal to change any fees at this
No,
this
it
point.
just was the hours as the
sure.
request.
No.
I'm very happy
Yep.
leaving it just the way it is.
All right, thank you. Okay, thanks for the clarification. That's good. All right, moving forward then. Number 4 is cleanup days for city in 2017 and then annually. Mr. Crumstock, again, would you like to start us out.
Sure thing. This is an item that a few municipalities actually do annually. We did one of these in 2013. I want to actually establish, bring it back to Rolling Meadows. For 2017, we would actually conduct 2 of these, and then we'd go annually after that point in time. Before anybody asks, this is not to clean my office. So
That would take,
I would need like a week. But the same thing is, it's a great opportunity for municipality to actually do the cleanup of their areas. Obviously, we have a lot of paper and we have a lot of documents that we have to keep in. And typically what happens is we keep them here at City Hall for a period of time, and then we need to move them off-site. But we have to evaluate, we have to box them, then we have to send them on their other way. Then we create a disposal list when it's appropriate, and that usually takes the state to give us approval a bunch of years. Just kidding. But it takes usually 4 to 6 months for the disposal.
60 days.
Typically, but I'm being nice to the state.
That's the law, 60 days.
But the idea is also to clean up our areas too. And municipalities that do this traditionally do it on a holiday that they're still open. And that's why President's Day is actually chosen, because that is not a city holiday per se, so we're actually here. As far as residents would be concerned, we would actually notify them via the door, obviously, that say the city hall is actually closed for business that day, because I got to tell you, most people, even if they come in for President's Day, the first question that they actually say to me is, "Oh, you guys are open?" Yeah, we are actually open. So it's used by a lot of municipalities. It's a way of cleaning up. It's another way for dealing with items. Obviously, if there's a major issue, we're going to address it. It's really majority for finance, community development, administration. Public Works can have their own cleanup if they really want to, but it also allows us to go through our boxes that are off storage, make sure which ones we can actually dispose of and get rid of them, and then open up some needed space that we actually have. So again, in the write-up for 2017, the recommendation is Thursday, May 30th, March 30th, I should say. And the reason that I chose that is that there's no adjudication, there's no major items that are actually scheduled for that Thursday at this point. It gives us about a month of notification and dealing that we actually have. It's not on a Monday or a Friday. And then we would actually do another one on October 9th for Columbus Day for this year. And then we would go annually, starting in 2018, to President's Day, that we would actually do these annual cleanups.
Okay. Thank you. Let's start with any clarifications on what Mr. Crumstock just said. Any clarifications on what he just said? There is not. Let's open this up for discussion then. Anybody would like to have any comments concerning this proposal? Mr. Banjer.
Thank you. I'm lukewarm about this, but only because it might be because I'm private sector employee. I always have been. I work in a warehouse, and we're given 15 minutes at the end of each day to clean up our workstation. And then I guess throughout the work week, the expectation is, everything in its place, a place for everything and everything in its place. This sounds a little different, just because I suppose we're not required to hang on to paperwork, but it's just tough for me to swallow, just because we're closing the city down for a day. I know if Alderman Judd was here, he'd most likely comment that, we want the residents to be able to get use out of their
Hey, let's just leave it. Right? He's not here tonight, so speak for yourself.
And I kind of agree with that concept. If we're open for business, I wouldn't want a sign to be on the door saying we're closed to business. Barry mentioned that if it's really important, we can let somebody in. It's just, I would imagine they'd turn after they saw the sign on the door and walk away. So I can see where Barry's coming from, looking for a day. It's just, I guess it's hard for me to wrap my head around that. If we could, like, from an operational standpoint, if we could just, and once again, I'm private sector, so we have busy days, we have slow days where we can actually do deep cleaning around the department. If the city has that sort of workflow, I would recommend that rather than shutting down the city offices for a day. That's about all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on this issue? No other, Mr. Diastis?
I'm not in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Short and sweet, the way I like it. I'm not too big on this either. The businesses that I've been involved in, I recognize that we have a lot of work to do in filing and things like that, and I wish I could just shut my company down and not take orders and things like that, but I can't. So I'm not too big on this either, but let's take a straw vote on this then, if that's all right. Those in favor of what Mr. Crumstock is proposing, please raise your hand. For I've got one. One in favor? And I suppose the rest, I'll just go ahead, and those against, I suppose? So 5 against, so that one didn't fly. Okay, all right. Moving on to last but not least, number 5, the Economic Development and Council calls, and Mr. Crumstock, you're the man of the hour.
Obviously, this is the last one that we've been talking about, so there is an attachment to this that talks about the 2016 new business list. The best way, as I mentioned in the write-up, is communication is always the best thing for anything, so this is just another outreach that we're utilizing. Obviously, with the Economic Development Committee, they've actually started with the January new business list, but they've divvied it up amongst themselves, and I do appreciate Alderman Majikis for taking 2 of those and reaching out to those, because staff has a different contact with them, but when a person from the Economic Development Committee, they might get additional feedback from that individual about their business or what do they need from the city. This recommendation before you is obviously when a year finishes, we actually do the sort and we distribute to the city council to make those same conversations in telephone calls, another outreach. And for some businesses, they will be open obviously for a full year. Others will be shorter than that. But again, it's another outreach. Anything that you want to tell the city that maybe we have not heard. Is there something that we can help you with? Is there some outreach that we need to take care of, or any of those kind of pieces before you? Unfortunately, when you look at the search and the sort that was done in 2016, Ward 1 would have 4 telephone calls, Ward 2 would have 17, Ward 3 would have 2, Ward 4 would have 5, Ward 5 would have 2, and Ward 6 would have 40 telephone calls to make during the year, and then Ward 7 would actually have 6. But it is suggested this way, it's actually the alderman of that ward actually making that outreach and getting the feedback and giving that feedback back to staff so we can actually have some additional conversations. And again, this is continuing with additional communication, but as the council knows, there's a letter that goes actually once the new business actually sets up from staff that introduce and reach out and contact. That letter does go out. There are people who do communicate back to staff, and then typically we have some turnaround with that too. But the other thing is obviously that we put in the final notes is starting in March. Assistant to the city manager Lori Cizak is actually going to be more involved with some of the owners with new businesses when they come in, and some of their outreach. And you've heard me say before where some of the contractors might not be giving the correct feedback or feedback at all at the owners. With the contact that Lori Cizak will be making, it will actually make sure that the owners are hearing some of those additional feedbacks and allowing some of the projects to work, and the owner feeling more comfortable communicating with us. And it also has a second part of that communication-wise, and the reason for that is also when we have a community event, obviously she's highly involved in that. It would allow the owner to have a contact with potentially participating or participating in a different way, and it's a great contact instead of always feeling uncomfortable talking to myself or others who might be on staff. And it should be a good working relationship, and hopefully those new businesses will feel comfortable in joining and participating in the city in different avenues too. But tonight's all up for telephone calls. A staff recommendation, obviously you saw before you, is for each alderman to make the contacts, but it's just a recommendation. If you decide to divvy it up differently, or if you speak really nicely to an alderman, maybe they will make your telephone calls for you. But We just sort of leave it out there as another open communication piece.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with, I have two parts again. We'll clarify what Mr. Crumstock just presented. Any questions for Mr. Crumstock on what he just said? Mr. Prina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we would, each ward would go out, or each alderman would go out to a ward and either make phone calls or knock on doors. Would there be a standard script, a standard information gathering piece so that when you go around and we try to put the matrix together of, okay, what are the concerns we have here? What are the problems we have here? What are the things that we could have done better? And I bring that up as someone who's gone to many, many ribbon cuttings in this city. And after they get me on the side, and I then begin to hear the horror stories, and they begin to tell me that they're not happy with a lot of things, and they really don't know if they even want to expand anymore in Meadows. So I'm more than willing. I'm knocking on doors, and I'm, as it is, and I do talk to the companies in my ward, but I'd like a little bit stronger clarification of what we hope to accomplish. Is it going to make the application process easier? Are people going to have a more positive attitude towards Meadows? As I've been walking through the city the last month, and economic development is one of the hot topics, especially for some homeowners who have informed me that when they go to try and even get room addition or windows or something done, and the contractor comes out and says, you're in Rolling Meadows, they say, I'm not going to deal with this.
So Mr. Prina, I appreciate your comments. To clarify for Mr. Crumstock, so right now, you're basically saying divide up with aldermen, get some feedback, and that's pretty much where you're at with this proposal that you're bringing us tonight, correct?
It's a look back 1 year after, or
Okay.
roughly, but it is
Very
a
good.
feedback
Very
communication.
good. So appreciate that. So now as we move into, and is there any more clarification about what Mr. Crumstock is mentioning? If not, let's move into the discussion section. And we also have a sign-in for that. That's Mr. Hill. And then we'll take everybody's discussion at the same time. But let's start with Mr. Hill, and then we'll move through the rest of the council.
Thanks again. I'll be very brief. As I read this, it makes a lot of sense to me that the businesses in this town recognize that they are as an important part of this community as our residents. And in fact, the matter is during the day, they may make up the larger share of the population of Rolling Meadows. It's always important, I think, not only for new businesses, but for all businesses, to have constant contact not only with the city staff, but with aldermen, because I do perceive that there probably is a different filter used, as Mr. Prina was just speaking about. And, Barry was talking about outreach and all the outreach and how that can be done. And so I thought I'd also use this opportunity I was hoping that this group and the Economic Development Committee could actually start having a discussion in the very near future of maybe having a Rolling Meadows Businesses Expo. Similar to concept to the Taste of the Town, but this is businesses. And they come in and the residents can see what our businesses do, what their products and services are. Maybe there's people in Rolling Meadows who can be potential buyers and suppliers of those businesses, and maybe even future employees of those businesses. So my point of my comments today is just that we must recognize that the businesses are a big lifeblood of this community, and over-communicate is better than under-communicate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Opening up to the council now, Mrs. Jacas.
Thank you. A couple things. And I gave Barry my feedback. He is correct. In EDC, we discussed about, we broke up the list, and a few of the members picked a couple businesses, and yes, I picked two to call. I think the list was like 7 or 8 businesses, something like that. But anyway, and these were new businesses, and I reached out to the 2 I had. One, I'm having trouble getting a hold of the gentleman, but I will continue to. The second one, I spoke to the gentleman. We probably talked for 10, 15 minutes. Very nice conversation. No script. I just introduced myself, told him, welcome to the community. We're happy to have his business. What expectations does he have, or what extra things could we do in all this? He's very excited about getting involved, and Lori and I then spoke about what he has already signed up for and looking to sign up for with the city. So very positive, and I think it's a great idea to go back, a year, at the end of the year or whatever, and I'll help other aldermen. Mr. Diastis obviously has quite a few in his ward, and I'm more than happy to make extra phone calls. I don't mind doing it all. In fact, I enjoy it.
They're phoning in now.
Oh, it's your business. They want to talk to you.
Your time's up.
I'm more than happy to talk to them. And in regard to Alderman Prana's comments about the negativity, I'm sorry, but I hear a lot of positive. So I don't want people to think that we're really difficult to work with and stuff. We just want things to be done properly, and I think that's important, and I think it helps the businesses and it helps the residents in the value of their properties and stuff. So I think this is a wonderful thing to do, and I think it should be done quite often throughout the year, maybe every, 6 months or whatever. Like I said, I'm more than happy to take on extra businesses and help out the other wards. So,
Thank you for those comments. Any other discussion? Mr. Cannon first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, too, think it's a good idea. I think a couple of the ideas that were just also presented to make this even a better program are steps in the right direction. I think if we do settle with this program, I think a script is almost in demand with some kind of a list of things to ask to make sure we're covering the things. I guess I would ask to even think about bringing it to even a higher level than this, and maybe bring an outside group in to help us with this process. And let me explain where I'm coming from. When a new person comes to town and they start their business here or expand it here, in my opinion, they may be reluctant to tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. It might be all positive. Doesn't necessarily need to be negative, but I think sometimes they might be more reluctant to tell us because we're on the city side. So I guess I would ask for people to think about possibly getting an outside group to come in and do the survey for us to get a little more honest assessment of issues. What we can build on. And again, like Ms. Majika said, it's not all negative. It could be very positive, and we can build on the things we're doing well and improve on things we're not doing so well. My wife thinks I'm a perfect husband, but she always mentions to me now and then that I can improve on just a few things here and there. So maybe we could use that's the same idea with this. Thank you.
So if I can clarify what you just said, so you like the idea of the outreach,
Yes.
but you're suggesting almost an alternate proposal to have an outside group do this for us that's professional in this area. We wish we could all be like Laura. Maybe we're not all, but she's got an incredible personality to do this. Maybe we all aren't as adept, although Ms. Majikas would be happy to help all of us, I know that. But so that's my understanding is that's what you'd like to propose, maybe versus what we've already got proposed with the element, correct?
And maybe even possibly do it as a two-step. I mean,
Okay.
we're not trying to discourage us
Fair enough.
doing it,
Fair
but
enough.
maybe get another outside group to kind of give us
Fair enough.
another look at it.
Very good, thank you. Other discussion? Start with Mr. Diastis and we'll work our way back.
Okay, so Ward 6, 40 calls. I'm in sales. I do 10 calls a day easy. 40 calls over the course of years is nothing. Mm-hmm. My only question is, if I'm working 8 to 6 every day, when do I get a chance to make my calls? I think it's a great idea, and I have no problem making the phone calls. I do a lot of them. But now I have to take time away from my job, and what will my boss say? I like Mike's idea a lot. In fact, I would expand on that and just say, not just get an outside company to call on the new ones, but call on everybody in every business in the city at least once a year and listen to them. Okay? I have no problem calling, and can I find time to make, 40 phone calls over the course of 12 months, what is that? Not even one a week. I'm sure I can squeeze one phone call in a week on my lunch hour somewhere, so I'll make my 40 without a problem, but I like Mike's idea that we get an independent outside company in to call all of these and to call the other ones and give them the actual script of what answers we're looking to get from them, so they can report back to us on an unbiased basis and say, here's where you guys are excelling and here's where you could use some assistance. So I like the idea a ton. I would support that wholeheartedly, even if it costs us some money, and I will make my 40 calls over the course of the year.
Fair enough. Other discussion, Ms. Majikis?
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I'm not really excited about an outside group. For one, I don't think it's necessary for us to spend whatever money. But the other thing is, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, I may be in Jewel one day and people recognize me and they say, you're Alderman Majikis. I'd like to talk to you about, and they have no problem telling me the pros and the cons. And all you have to do is ask when you're talking to the businesses too, are you having any difficulties, or is there something we can improve on, or have you had any trouble dealing with anybody or anything in particular in process? So I haven't had the problem of anybody being open about difficulties they've had or something they're against. So I'm really not, I don't think people will hold back. The other thing is, it meant a lot to the gentleman I just spoke to that I called him. Because when I introduced myself and everything, he was like, I really appreciate that someone on city council took the time to reach out to me. Not some group that is outside of our city. It's not part of our city. It just meant a lot to him that, I took the extra little few minutes and I'm sitting on the council. So that's just how I feel.
Fair enough. Any other discussion? Mr. Banger?
Thank you. Yeah, I can see both sides of this. My preference, I would almost agree with Alderman Cannon in terms of having an outside service do this, because they can brainstorm questions for a script. They can have a detailed list of where to go with questions when the answers, they can have a matrix, in other words, and then they can summarize and analyze and give us just deliver some goods that have been sifted through, rather than what I think would be just an amalgamation of 7 people calling. And my Iowa Farm Boy conversation with anybody would be a lot different than anybody else, I'm sure. And it'd be nice and chummy, but probably fairly, just fairly, how's the weather out there sort of thing. So I don't know if all of us are equipped to have these sorts of conversations with city businesses. So I would almost opt for going with third party. At the very least, maybe looking into, and I agree with Alderman Majikis in terms of, are we going to drop a load of dough on this? Could we find out how much something like that would cost? And I'd be interested in getting that information before going that route. If it's prohibitively expensive, then I guess I would default to Alderman Majikis' preference of, let's just make the calls. I've only got 2, so I'm certainly not going to complain, but my preference, my first preference would be going with Alderman Cannon's suggestion.
Fair enough. Mr. Prana? I knew you were going to raise your hand. I saw it going up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see.
Mike.
I'm glad you're next to me, Laura.
Well, Barry was really
Thank you, Laura.
so.
Help
Yeah,
him.
but I was to you. Sorry. I see both sides of what we're attempting to do. If to go forward, I'm looking for something. What do we hope to accomplish? I mean, if we go with an outside group, do we give them certain marketing markers? Or I'm more than willing to make phone calls and work with Laura, but what information do we want to gather? I guess that would be my next step of where we're going to do. In other words, do we have a plan, or do we just need someone to just come in like one time who maybe works with another city and come back to us and say, hey, these are the things that you need to do. And that might help focus us on where to go.
Gotcha.
I just don't want to go out and let's go find somebody. Let's talk to some of your fellow mayors around here and see who they're using.
Right. Let me maybe just make a comment on this too. So in the world that I live, with companies I deal with, there are outside groups you go to and they do marketing and marketing surveys and things like that. And I appreciate what Mrs. Majikis is saying, because I too, when I'm out now more than ever, have a lot of people talking to me, and that wouldn't stop. That wouldn't stop. The only thing that I saw in this proposal initially that is missing is, Alderman, okay, you're asking questions and you're going to have to put it down somewhere. It's going to have to end up going to Mr. Crumstock the way it is. Mr. Crumstock, you're going to have to do something with 40 calls there, 6 here, this here, this here, this here, and then it's all going to have to come together some way, and it's going to have to come back to us.
That's correct.
So that's a big job for you, in addition to what you've already got going on. And, we all can do what we have to do. But so I don't think it's an issue of getting feedback to an alderman. I believe they will tell us. It's a matter of what we do with the information once we got it, and how do we continue to enhance the good things that Rolling Meadows does. And number two, let's work on improvement on the things that we hear that aren't as good as the things that we're very, very good at. So I see both sides. My preference is to get some action. I also, it seems like you hear more about the negative sometimes than the positive, but I hear both sides. I think with an independent group, and I'm aware of some, and I would be happy to take that on as an assignment, that's what they do for a living. That you give them the list of not just the ones from 1 year, like you were saying, Mr. Diastis, but the whole list of every business in Rolling Meadows, and they would go through it. And I know there's a cost, and we wouldn't do anything until we knew how much it cost, and we can narrow down the scope based on what it is. They do this for a living. They would, hit the different bullet points of what we're trying to expect. How were you treated when you came? Were you welcomed? Did you help you with the permits? Did we not help you with the permits? And if we had a problem with the permit, how did it work? Did we help you with signs or not? Whatever the issue was, good and bad, it would be coming back to the council to a meeting like this and would be reported to us. And again, I don't know what the cost is either, but I'd be happy to investigate that and bring it back to the council. But again, my preference is more to get an independent outside group to do a lot of this work and bring it back to us, and then we can have conversations based on what the feedback is. Mr. Crumstock.
Can I just make a compromise if everybody is willing to do it? I guess what I would actually say is allow staff to work during 2017 to vet and look for different services, and then put it into the 2018 budget that we do the full vetting of businesses and getting that information back to a committee of the whole, but also for this year, for 2017, now that we're halfway through February, is that we make the telephone calls this year, we do the vetting this year, and then obviously in the 2018 budget, we would have a better idea of pricing. Then we can also make sure who we're bringing in for all the businesses, but also making sure that it is actually in the budget, so we're not just trying to play, but it gives us the year to actually do the due diligence on it.
Okay, so that would be a third proposal then. So the one I've got is the one that was suggested. Then we've got the outside one. Now, Mr. Crumstock, you're making comment about the vetting, and that would be a 2018 kind of a message. Mr. Diastis.
I am not at all interested in waiting until 2018. The fact is, I would rather you just do it and get some prices and come back to us as soon as you can. We wait. City government, all government just takes too long. I've heard too many stories, and I don't want to wait till 18 to find out which ones are good and which ones are bad. I don't want to do it now. So thank you, Mr. Crumstock, but I am absolutely adamantly opposed to waiting a year to do something. We need to get something started, and we need to get something started now. I, too, have walked around a lot and hear a lot about economic development, and people are tired of waiting. So we need to move on this, and It's got to be done now. I'm sorry, I'm not willing to wait at all, not even a day. That's
Thank
all.
you, Mr. Yes. I would just make a comment to that I would be happy to work with Mr. Comstock to get it done sooner, with the background that he has. Other discussion, Mrs. Majikis?
Clarification, though, we're not waiting to do the phone calls and the program and the reaching out. Am I correct,
No,
Barry? That
it's
you're
cer-
just waiting for the budgeting, the cost?
Yep.
Right.
So in other words, we're going to make these phone calls and get on this now. We're not pushing anything off. So
Mm-hmm. Right.
I just wanted to make sure. 'cause
Right.
I'll make the calls. So.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon.
So understanding what was just said, and if we're going to make the calls, I don't think any of us seem to have a problem with that. I guess we will go back to some of the original statement was made, though I think we should follow some kind of a pattern.
Which we can create a script.
Okay, just so there's some, so we're all kind of trying to get to the similar answers, I guess. Thanks.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Prina?
I agree that we have to move forward quickly. So we can do this in 2 stages. One, can we in 30 days have this up and running with us in the city doing it, and at the same time looking for what you are suggesting? Because that's going to take some time to
Yes.
get out there.
Yes.
But in 30 days, can we get the names, businesses, script, and we'll have it all up? I'll buy the first set of pizzas and pop, and we all sit around the table. Just like the good old days. But
Okay.
basically, to get off track is
No, thank-
first
thank-
30 days, let's see if we can get us going. At the same time, you work
Yep.
on what you can to see how quickly you can get that
Thanks.
going.
Thanks for that. Any other discussion on that before I kind of do a little summary here, if I can clarify correctly? Okay. So the first proposal is to continue. Okay, the first one, and we'll just do a show of hands. I've actually got 3 items right here right now. I've got the alderman continue with calls. Okay. Then I've got look for an outside group that can continue outside calls, but maybe also include businesses that are outside the 70-some that are in this document. So in other words, hopefully touch like almost every business in Rolling Meadows and see what's going on, which is a larger scope than what we're talking about with the alderman. Okay, so that's the second item. Is that clear? Then the third one was the vetting of putting together a budget and coming up with some different groups to do this kind of marketing survey, and then adopt this in 2018. Okay, that's the third one, the way I have it set. Is that what I understand? Okay. So let's do a straw vote. Then we'll start with number 1. Number 1 being alderman make phone calls. The way the proposal is situated right now, and continue with that. Show of hands for that. Okay, that's.
Are we allowed to vote twice,
You-
one and
you-
two?
I believe you can vote for
Okay,
2.
well, I wasn't sure, okay.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Is that unanimous? Okay, I didn't catch everybody there, right? Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2 is look at an outside marketing survey group that does this for a living to include all businesses of Rolling Meadows and put together a sheet and with questions to get the input from businesses of all Rolling Meadows, number 1, and to continue with that and pull that information together in some type of an analytical report and bring it back to this council so that we will know what every business thinks of us, both incredibly good and maybe incredibly bad. And then we'll have information and at least a survey on what's happening in our town with respect to businesses. So that's the second one.
Can I
Yes.
ask
Yep.
clarification on that one?
Sure.
But that one where you're talking that you want that ASAP,
Yes.
not
Thank
the
you.
budget for 20,
Yes, thank
that
you.
one
Thank
ASAP.
you.
Okay.
Good clarification. I should have added that. Okay. So we'll do it the second one. Who's in favor of doing that? Please raise your hands on that one. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
5.
5. Okay, 2 hands in. 5.
John's voting
Okay.
for Brad, obviously.
So that's a plus. The third one is Mr. Crumstock's. This is the vetting on waiting till 2018, and is anybody interested in that. Mrs., raise your hands if you're interested in that. Mrs. Majikis, there's one vote for that. So that one does not want to move forward. So we'll move forward with the first one and the second one, and I'll work with you, Mr. Crumstock, on the second one, and we'll bring something back as soon as we can back to this group. Okay, committee of the whole meeting. Is that fair? Okay. Any other discussion this evening?
That's all that we
Anything else?
have.
That's all I believe we have then. Do I have?
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I do.
Mr. Cannon, a second.
Two.
Mr. Diastis, thank you all for your help tonight.
Thanks. 2 and 3.
Thank you.
Two hands.
All the same, say aye? Aye.